Margaret Selby, is Bob's mechanism consistent with formation of a supercontinent at a pole, such as Rodinia?
Yes. I don't think the poles have any say in the matter. Yeah, it is. Because it's just one end or the other of the axis of rotation.
Yes, as I understand it, doesn't matter which way the spin is going in relation to the breakup.
Yeah, yeah. And let's face it, we have a continent there anyway, which is one of the largest on the planet, Antarctica.
Well, I would make one comment, which is that in the last month, I've written to the major tectonics authors of major publications. I've written to geologists in Canada, the United States, Russia, China, Switzerland. I can't remember all the countries, and Britain. And nobody has contradicted what Bob is saying.
Wow.
No, but most of them have simply not replied. I have had some replies, but as soon as I engage in trying to explain what Bob's saying, they say, "Oh, that's just way beyond my field of understanding." So the people who are at the cutting edge, I think that it's repeating what Stuart says, really. The people who are doing the research are not looking at this. They're looking at the mantle. Everything that Dow said is very well researched, because we now have such solid data that all of the research is going into looking at the data we have about the mantle. But it would be ironic at the end if Bob's theory actually shows that they've all got it round, cause and effect round the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's not unknown in science for that to happen.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is go back to the 19th century when famous British geologists, and particularly in Scotland, were investigating the Highlands of Scotland, and they had no idea about thrust faults at the time. So how did you get a metamorphic rock sitting on top of a sedimentary rock? And it took a long time to work that out. And there were academic battles going on between the various proponents of theories.
Anybody else got any thoughts on what you've heard? Whether
He's got his hand up.
Who has?
Joey?
I just had an itch on my nose. That was all. Well, I just want to add to what was just said. There's a number of things that are just not being researched and would use quantification with the help of engineers, maybe, or astrophysicists. So going back to the mantle, which I'm somewhat more familiar with than anything of the rest I've presented. Even the density anomalies are not really quantified. So yes, we can see them in seismic velocity, but the actual densities of sinking slabs and rising plumes are still simply unknown. And as I was, Stuart, myself, were just emailing briefly yesterday or earlier today. We don't even know how a slab, how it gets denser with depth. We see them go all the way to the core mantle boundary, but that means that slabs need to become twice as dense, minimal, to be able to overcome the densities of the deeper mantle, as far as we understand it. And at the moment, I'm not aware of any literature that actually has been able to pin that down.
The only thing that I do know about is that the basalts get converted to eclogite, which has a higher density, but it's not twice as much. It's like about 10% as much. But it's enough to drive it down a little bit. But after a little while, it's sunk.
Yeah, and it's an issue. There's different mineral phases that are possible, but no one has done any kind of further work on what that would mean in terms of the density structure of the Earth, or even the mantle. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, now. We've only been conversing over the last couple of days. We never met each other. So it's very interesting to meet you. Hello,
Hi.
lad. But we seem to be thinking along exactly the same lines, even though we're coming at it from different backgrounds, really. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, I've never done research on the structure of the Earth before. I've just read articles and been interested. This is the first time I've done it. My experience is basically as a sedimentary geologist, and that's been my career. But I'm an all-round geologist, so I like to think I can do the other side as well.
Well, I'd really like to get some physicists involved with this, because it is a bigger question than just looking at the mantle in isolation. It's somebody, as Stuart pointed out, look at astrophysics, look at different planetary bodies, and look at the current state of knowledge. But
Yeah.
I'm struggling to get any physicists to respond to me. Even the physicist who I know well hasn't replied to my email. I think it's just a question that's a bit of a surprise. People don't quite know what to do with it.
Well,
Liz,
Got his hand up.
Dave has got his hand up.
Dave, I didn't spot you there. Dave.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
just about to leave, but before I go, I want to make a very brief comment, which is I've always been a bit doubtful about Bob's theory. I'm more convinced now than I was before because of the two presentations that we've just seen. And I wonder if we're in the position where we are almost elevating Bob to the status of an Alfred Wegener, on the basis that we have a non-geologist coming into a field which he professes to have not major expertise, and making a radical change in thinking, which affects the whole of the science.
right, David. And
David, thank you so much for saying that.
Was Hutton from Edinburgh, no formal education in geology whatsoever. He worked it out from first principles himself.
Yeah.
Let me just say thank you, David. I will relay what you said to Bob, and he will be really chuffed.
I'm not saying we should be, but
No, but I'll tell him you
are
said.
we?
I'm thinking.
And I will now say good night and leave you.
Anybody else want to say something?
Well, I suppose I could just say, going back to Liz's point at the beginning about continents changing direction. My big problem with all of this is the West Indies, where I was brought up with the slab pool idea, and you've got subduction going on there because it's the oldest bit of the continent, the oceanic crust, and therefore it's going down. But that seems to be completely different to the rest of what's going on that coast. And just, I mean, I can't begin to cope with the mechanics of all this, but just from that sort of observation, I just find it quite difficult.
Sorry, Diana. Did you? Because I don't know what's going on in the Caribbean. Is it contrary to what Bob's saying, or is it contrary to the subduction and slab pool theory?
It's contrary to your diagram of the continent going east at that point.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look at that one. I could only see it in broad terms.
As I understand it, anyway.
If I can expand on the West Indies, so there is indeed old oceanic crust of the both North American and South American oceanic crust, and a minor fracture zone in between, which is Jurassic in age. Indeed, the West Indies have gone over the top of that, but the Caribbean plate as a whole is actually relatively fixed. It's very stationary in a way. It's one of the very few plates actually that's very fixed, relatively speaking. Now, the subduction zone on the eastern side, so the West Indies, my understanding is indeed that it is subducting there. And there are some some spreading zones immediately to the west of the West Indies, where there's been a minor amount of spreading. So what you see happening there is you've got a relatively local extension as a result of the slab sinking vertically, is my understanding. It also happens in the Aegean Sea, for example, in Greece. So that is a relatively local effect that has taken place. So Diana, you're right, or was it Chappie? Not sure. And Liz is right as well, but she was talking about continents, which is a different story altogether. So you're just both at the different topics here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, Dara.